Recently, as Phil pointed out, we have opportunity to do some work in Libby, Montana. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that, but I can tell you this. This is a town that's been heavily dusted with asbestos by the operation of a mine, a vermiculite mine. Vermiculite's the stuff that they use in attic insulation and in as a soil conditioner to make it aerated. And 80% of the world's vermiculite came from this mine in this small town in northwestern Montana. Right? And it was owned and operated since 1963 by W.R. Grace, a very large construction materials corporation that knew that it contained asbestos back then when they bought it in '63, knew that the workers' x-rays were showing abnormalities but said nothing about it. They actually gave the tailings from the mine, which are up to 26% by weight asbestos, to the school to build a running track, to the town to build bedding for the playgrounds, and freely available to anyone who wanted to cart, a bunch in their pickup truck for use in their home for insulation or for in their gardens. The town is so badly contaminated, it's the #1 Superfund site in the United States right now. There are hundreds of deaths that have occurred from lung cancer and mesothelioma and asbestosis, the highest asbestosis death rate in the United States, as a result of the exposures that went on, which could have been totally avoided because management knew. Now, you may or may not have heard that recently management was indicted on criminal trial, for having done this. But the charges against the management executives were crafted in such a way so that only their activities after the mine closed in 1990 could be brought into trial for technical reasons that were rejected by an appeals court, but the appeals court's decision wasn't binding. So here you had the mix of things that Dr. Selikoff would have, I think, really gotten enthusiastic about. Number one, you had a terrible company. And that, if you think that what W.R. Grace did is unusual, the history of asbestos companies in the United States pretty much replicate this over and over again. Knowing that the material could cause harm, saying nothing about it because profit share, market share would have been, affected by it. But there's another thing going on in Libby that makes it very interesting and would have been something that would have provoked, I think, Dr. Selikoff's interest. And that is that the disease is different from what we see among our construction workers, our insulators and pipe fitters, etc. This disease moves very fast. Among our asbestos workers who are very heavily exposed, the disease proceeds, it progresses, slowly but surely, and can be very disabling ultimately, no question. But in Libby, Montana, you see the disease go from minimal to tremendous amount of pleural thickening, scarring of the lining of the lung in 3-4 years, with tremendous consequence on lung function. There are many people running around that town with oxygen concentrators, right? Not because the doc there, who's a remarkable and heroic person, Dr. Brad Black, not because he likes giving out oxygen. He gets the scientific studies, the clinical studies that show these people desaturate when they exercise. They lose their oxygen saturation. At night, they lose their oxygen saturation. And he's giving them oxygen as a way to help carry them through so that they can walk down the street without being so short of breath that they have to stop. Right? And that disease behaves differently. It has one of the highest rates of mesothelioma and lung cancer in the United States. And I wound up being invited there. I'd written, look, Mount Sinai is famous for its work in asbestos-related disease. Anybody, who thinks about asbestos-related problems is going to think about Mount Sinai exactly because of Dr. Selikoff. But I'd written this review in the American Journal of Industrial Medicine on how do you evaluate a worker for asbestos-related disease. Somebody in the community got hold of it, and called me, would I come be involved in this? And then the EPA called, and when I learned about what was going on in that town, it was impossible to resist. And so Laura, right, and Jaime Zainuk, and I, and now Ken Spaeth, we all are going to be involved in this grant to evaluate the particular nature of the disease there, right, because it's different. And when there are differences in the way the disease behaves clinically, that means sometimes there's a difference in mechanism. We still don't understand how asbestos causes scarring. We still don't understand how it causes cancer. We know that it does, right? But the mechanism at the cellular level is not understood. You get differences in the way the disease presents, the course of disease. Sometimes in those differences you can find out what's going on here at a mechanism level. And the mechanism is important because sometimes that leads to interventions, because we don't know how to stop the process of scarring, and we don't know how to stop You know, the process of cancer causation, right? We only know how to maybe try to find it early enough to treat it. And Libby is at least a place where we may be able to look at some of those questions.